Authentication and authorization might sound similar, but they are different security processes. Authentication confirms that the user are who they say they are, where authorization gives those users permission to access resources. In this video, we will look at solution for multi-factor authentication. After that, solution for single sign-on, then solution for hybrid identity, and finally business to business integration. In the end, we will also share details about our free masterclass, which will not only help you to learn basics, but it will also give you an idea of the learning part to follow. It would be helpful, especially when you're preparing for Azure Solution Architect certification. And to clear this certification, you should be having an understanding of authentication and authorization. We have taken a clip from one of our certification training program on Azure Solution Architect. And in this clip, instructor will talk about authentication and authorization. Now let's hear from our expert on the same.
So recommend a solution for MFA or multi-factor authentication. So what is authentication and authorization? So this topic defines authentication and authorization briefly, covers how you can use Microsoft Identity Platform to authenticate and authorize users in your web apps, web APIs, or apps calling protected web APIs. So authentication is the process of proving who you are, as in who you say you are. So you are just confirming your identity. Authentication is sometimes shortened to auth-in. Microsoft Identity Platform implements OpenID Connect protocol for handling authentication. Authorization is the act of granting an authenticated party permission to do something. It specifies what data you're allowed to access and what you can do with that data. Authorization is sometimes shortened as OAuth. Microsoft Identity Platform implements the OAuth 2.0 protocol for handling authorization. So authentication and authorization when done in Microsoft Identity. So we will go through a brief comparison of various protocols that are used by Microsoft Identity Platform. So OpenID versus OAuth. So OAuth is used for authorization and OpenID Connect or OIDC is used for authentication. OpenID is built on top of OAuth 2.0, so the terminology and flow are similar between the two. You can even both authenticate a user using OpenID Connect and get authorization access protected resource that user owns using OAuth 2 in a single request, which is Azure Multi-Factor Authentication. So protecting your cloud assets is one of the primary goals for your security group. One of the primary ways unauthorized users get access to the system is by obtaining a valid password or username combination. Azure can help mitigate this with several features of Azure Active Directory, which includes password complexity rules. So this will force users to generate harder to guess passwords. Then password expiration rules. You can force users to change their passwords on a periodic basis and avoid using previously used passwords. SSPR. This allows users to self-serve and reset their password if they have forgotten it without involving an IT department. Azure AD Identity Protection. To help your organization's identities, you can configure risk-based policies that automatically respond to risky behaviors. These policies can either automatically block the behaviors or initiate a remediation. This including requiring a password change. Azure AD Password Protection. So you can block commonly used and compromised passwords via a globally banned password list. Azure AD Smart Lockout. So Smart Lockout helps lock out malicious hackers who are trying to guess your users' passwords or use brute force attacks to get it. It recognizes sign-in coming from valid users and treats them differently than the ones from malicious hackers or other unknown resources. Azure AD Application Proxy. You can provision security enhancement remote access to your on-premise web applications. SSO. You can use single sign-on to access your applications. This includes thousands of pre-integrated SaaS apps. Azure AD Connect. So create and manage a single identity for each user across your hybrid enterprise, keeping users, groups, and devices in sync. These are all great options which deter someone guessing or brute forcing a password. However, sometimes passwords are obtained through social engineering or poor physical security. So in these cases, the above features won't stop intrusion. Instead, security administrators will want to turn on Azure MFA. So we will see what MFA is about. So Azure Multi-Factor Authentication supplies added security to your identities by requiring two or more elements to complete the authentication or fulfill the authentication. Some elements fall into three categories: something you know, which might be a password, answer to a security question; something you possess, which might be a mobile app that receives a notification or a token generating device; something you are, typically up is a biometric property such as a fingerprint or a face scan used on many mobile devices. So using Azure MFA increases identity security by limiting the impact of credential exposure. To fully authenticate, a malicious hacker who has your password would need your phone or fingerprint. Authentication is with only single factor is insufficient. Without the authentication from Azure MFA, the malicious hacker is unable to use those credentials to authenticate. You should enable Azure MFA wherever possible because it adds enormous benefit to your security. So let's see what is conditional access. So the modern security perimeter now extends beyond organizations' network to include user and device identity. Organizations can utilize these identity signals as part of their access control decisions. Conditional access is the tool used by Azure Active Directory to bring signals together to make decisions and enforce organizational policies. Conditional access is at the heart of the new identity-driven control plane. So it includes a signal, something like user logging from a particular location, an IP address, or a particular host like Windows 10 machine, a Mac machine, a Linux machine, an iOS device, Android device, a browser. So there are a lot of signals. If any of this signal is becoming true, you can make a decision whether you want to allow the access. You have to you can block the access, or you need to go through MFA. All these decisions can be made and the policy can be enforced on the user. So conditional policies at their simplest are if-then statements. If a user wants to access a resource, they must complete an action. For example, a payroll manager wants to access the payroll application and is required to complete MFA to access it. So this is one conditional access. So since when they are accessing the payroll application, that's when MFA is enforced to that user. So this is how the Azure architecture or the workflow of a conditional access. So these are the different signals a device like which operating system that you're using or what client that you're using. User and location, you can specify the country or you can specify the IP address. Application like Edge, Safari, or some other legacy application. Real-time risk, that this is something actually supplied by the identity protection. If something, let's say a user is signing from India and within 15 minutes the same sign-in happens for the user from another country, for example France or Germany. So that is not technically possible that you can now travel from India to Germany in 15 minutes. So that raises some flags. So those are real-time flags that will be reported by the identity protection and that will be sent to the conditional access. So we can enforce that policy. So whenever that real-time risk happens, it will trigger a conditional access policy. And based on any of the signals, you can either allow the access, require MFA. So that will go for MFA, like you have to use your phone, a biometric, or any other device to complete the MFA, or you can directly block the access if you feel it's not secure. So this is the workflow. So when we were taking the AZ303 training, we actually tried to create a conditional access policy and see how to enforce the access or how to block access for a particular application from user from accessing the application. So these are all done using conditional access policy. Plan for MFA deployment. So Azure Multi-Factor Authentication is enforced with conditional access policies. Conditional access policies are if-then statements. If a user wants to access a resource, then they must complete an action. So we talked about the payroll manager, right? So if a payroll manager wants to access the payroll application, then that user is required to complete MFA. So some common access requests that might require MFA include if a specific cloud application is accessed, if a user is accessing from a specific network, if a user is accessing a specific client application, if a user is registering a new device. So all this can be used to trigger MFA. When you turn on Azure MFA, you can choose authentication methods that you want to make available. You should always support more than one method, so users will have a backup option in case their primary method is unavailable. You can choose from mobile app verification code that will use the Microsoft Authenticator app, and you will receive the code, and you can use the code to authenticate. Then call to a phone. Azure can call a supplied phone number. The user then approves the authentication using keypad. This is the preferred backup method. Text message to a phone. A text message with the verification code can be sent to the mobile phone of the user. The user then enters the verification code into the sign interface to complete the authentication. So administrators can enable one or more above options. Then users can opt into each support authentication method they want to use. Recommend a solution for single sign-on. Azure Active Directory's seamless single sign-on automatically signs users in when they are on their corporate devices connected to your corporate network. When enabled, users don't need to type in their passwords or sign into Azure AD. Usually even not even typing their usernames. This feature provides your users easy access to cloud-based applications without needing for additional on-premise components. Seamless SSO can be combined with either password hash synchronization or pass-through authentication sign-in methods. Seamless SSO is not applicable to ADFS. So let's see some of the key benefits of using. So when it comes to user experience, users can automatically sign into both on-premise and cloud-based applications. Users don't have to enter their passwords repeatedly. No additional components needed on-premise to make this work. Work with any method of cloud authentication like password hash synchronization, pass-through authentication. Can be rolled out to some or all users in your group as per your group policy. Registering non-Windows 10 devices with Azure AD without the need for any ADFS infrastructure. This capability needs you to use version 2.1 or later of the workplace joint client. So if you are using Linux machines or something, or not even Windows 10 machines, you can actually use SSO. Some of the features, the sign-in name can be either the on-premise default username, which is the user principal name, or another attribute configured in Azure AD Connect, alternate ID. Both use cases work because seamless SSO uses the security identifier claim in the Kerberos ticket to look up for the corresponding user object in Azure AD. Seamless SSO is an opportunistic feature. If it fails for any reason, the user sign-in experience go back to its regular behavior. That is, the user needs to enter their password on the sign-in page. So even if the SSO is down, the users will not be affected. They just have to enter their password. And sign out is supported. This allows users to choose other Azure AD accounts to sign in with instead of being automatically signed in using the seamless SSO. It can be enabled via Azure AD Connect. If you guys recall our AZ303 session, we actually enabled SSO when we were setting up AD Connect. And it's a free feature above all, and you don't need any paid editions of Azure AD to use it. So these are some features of Azure AD. So some of the considerations that you have to take in when using Azure AD Seamless Single Sign-On. So below are the key sign methods for recommending Azure AD Seamless SSO. Some of the key questions: what sign-in methods do Seamless SSO work with? Seamless SSO can be combined with either PHS or PTA sign-in methods. This feature cannot be used with ADFS. Is Seamless a free feature? Yes, it's a free feature. Is Seamless available in Microsoft Azure Germany Cloud and the Microsoft Azure Government Cloud? No. Seamless SSO is only available in the worldwide instance of Azure AD. What applications can take advantage of domain hint or login hint parameter capability of Seamless SSO? So listed on the screen, currently you can see a non-exhaustive list of applications that can send those parameters to Azure AD. So therefore users can use a silent sign-on experience using Seamless SSO. So you can directly specify the domain hint and it will be redirected. Recommend a solution for hybrid identity. So considerations. So an evaluation is important to define the technical requirements for setting up and enabling organization users for MFA. So there will be some questions like, is your company trying to secure Microsoft apps? How are your apps published? Does your company provide remote access to allow employees to access on-premise app? If yes, what type of remote access? Where are the users going to be located? Can they be located anywhere? So there are a lot of questions that will come up. Like we have to define the MFA strategy, define the requirements of rolling out MFA, do technical requirements for enabling MFA. So depending upon this, there is a decision tree and we have to choose what kind of authentication method or hybrid identity that we have to choose. So we have seen the same image when we were talking about hybrid identities in ASC 303. So based on your customer's requirement, and you have to follow this flowchart and see what would be the ideal way of bringing your hybrid identities to the cloud. So we were discussing about password hash synchronization and pass-through authentication. So basically when we talk about PHS, password hash synchronization, so you have your on-premise Active Directory here, and this is your on-premise Active Directory. So that's your on-premise Active Directory. We will connect this to Azure AD Connect. So Azure AD Connect is a tool that is used for synchronizing on-premise identities to the cloud. So we will have kind of a server thing here and I'll pick a color simply. So this is your AD Connect. And I'll just name it AD Connect. So the AD Connect, its responsibility is to push synchronize connectivity, synchronize identities to the cloud. So this is your on-premise. This part is your on-premise. And on the other side, you will have Azure AD. So this is your Azure AD. That's your Azure AD, and you have a user here. So whenever a user sign in, what happens is, so when you do a AD Connect, it synchronizes the password hash. So let's say the username, this user is Ellie. So Ellie's username will be in the Active Directory here. Ellie's password is password 123. That is not a good password anyways. I'll just make it use that for simplicity. So what happens is during AD Connect, the password hash, so let's say I'm doing a hash algorithm on this one, it generates a code, something like 123 FD E5, something like a hash code. So this code is actually sent to Azure AD and it's stored in Azure AD. So hash sync happens. So Azure AD has that hash stored somewhere here, which is 123FDE, something like that. So whenever Ellie logs in, Ellie goes here and AD will ask for the username and password. Ellie will send that information. So Ellie will type the same password, right? Password, if she knows the password anyways. 123. This Azure AD will convert that password to a hash value. So 123FDE5. So if this value and this value is equal, that means she entered the right password. So the hash is stored in the cloud, and we don't have to reach out to the on-premise Active Directory to complete the authentication. The authentication is done by the cloud itself. So this is password hash synchronization. When it comes to password PHS or PTA, which is pass-through authentication, what happens is, so again you have on-premise Active Directory. I'll type AD. This is your on-premise. So there you will be connecting that to AD sync for synchronizing the identity. AD connect. This AD connect will be connected to your AAD, which is in the cloud. This is your on-prem. This is cloud. So Ellie, the same user, is here as well. So Ellie goes to sign into some application. It's asking for password. So Ellie puts her passwords, which is password 123. That request is actually authenticated against the on-premise Active Directory. So that information will be sent to the on-premise Active Directory. The on-premise AD will check if the password is right. If it is right, it will allow the user to sign in or do whatever action. So it's a pass-through. So the pass-through happens here. AD helps in pass-through, like the request actually goes to the on-premise. So this is pass-through. So this is what happens. And there are some agents. There will be agents here which are called PTA. So if I go back to the slide, you can see there are some agents running here, PTA. So these agents help in sending the request to the Azure Active Directory. So these are done to make it redundant, just because if you are directly interacting with the Active Directory and for some reason Azure AD couldn't communicate with on-premise Active Directory, that means something is wrong. So it is recommended that we install it on some other servers, some authentication agents, so that the request comes to the authentication agent, and those will be pointed to the on-premise Active Directory. So it's simple. The hash is stored in the cloud. All authentication happen against Azure AD. Here, all authentication happens against the on-premise server or AD server. When it comes to federation, you will have Active Directory, then there is a federation server, federation proxy, and similarly whenever a user signs in, the redirection happens to the ADF federation proxy. Then proxy sends that to the federation server and it will communicate with the Active Directory. So this is how ADFS is configured. Recommend a solution for B2B integration. With Azure AD B2B, the partners use their own identity management solutions, so there is no external administrative overhead for your organization. Partners use their own identity and credentials. Azure AD is not required. You don't need to manage external accounts or passwords. You don't need to sync accounts to manage account life cycles. Then guest users can sign into apps and services with their own work, school, or social identities. If the guest user doesn't have a Microsoft account or Azure AD account, one is created for them when they redeem their invitation. So invited users, using their email identity of their choice, they can do it. Sends a direct link to an app or send an invitation to the guest users on access panel. Guest users can follow redemption steps to sign. So you can add guest users to Azure Active Directory. So you can actually add it from the portal itself. We have actually added guest users and send invitation to this users. So when this users gets that email, they can simply click on that, and they will be joined as part of. They can join the organization as guest users. And these guest users in the directory can be assigned to apps and groups and etc. And you can delegate the guest user management to application owners so that they can add guest users directly to any application they want to share, whether it's Microsoft application or not. Azure AD supports external identity providers like Facebook, Microsoft accounts, Google, or enterprise identity providers. You can set up federation with identity providers so your external users can sign in with their existing social or enterprise account instead of creating a new account just for application. So this is also possible to do. So if I go to the external identity in my Azure Active Directory, I can see all identity providers. I can add Google if I want. I have to create the client ID and all with the Google APIs to register it. I can add for Facebook. Similarly, I have to go to Facebook for developers page, create a client ID and secret for this. And so that's how you play with identity, manage identity providers which are external.
That was a clip on authentication and authorization. Now we have put down everything about the certification, including basic concept that one should know everything like design authentication and authorization solutions, design a governance solution, design a compute solution, design a non-relational data storage solution, all the way design a data storage solution for relational data, design a solution to log and monitor Azure resources, design a network infrastructure solutions, design a business continuity solutions, design a migrate solution along with tips and resources to clearing the certification exam. We have dedicated team working for CB preparation and most important on-job support. If you are interested, I would like to invite you for 45 to 90-minute free class with our certified expert trainer, which will not only help you to learn basics, but it will also give you an idea of the learning part to follow. This interactive session will help you to gaining an understanding of why and who should learn Azure Cloud, Azure Certification Roadmap for Architects, your paths to earning the Azure Solution Architect Expert Certification, difference between AZ 303, 304, and 305, demo on deploying Azure Container Instance, and more other topics. You can register for this free class by visiting k21academy.com/az30502. Let me show you a quick demonstration how you can do the same. Go to any browser and type k21academy.com/az30502 and hit enter. After landing on free class page, just click on register now. Fill out your details like your name, your email address, your mobile number. After that, click on register now. It will redirect you to thank you page where you will get all the necessary information about this free class, like what we are going to cover in this free class and the webinar link. So guys, at last, if you found this video helpful, please give a thumbs up. If you have any doubts or queries, you can put them down in comment section. Our team will get back to you. Till then, take care.